this might be the first 10 out of 10 rating that I give to a Marvel comic. Howdy, I'm Kurt Williams, and today we're looking at Book 1 of Avengers Twilight by Chip Zdarsky and Daniel Acuña. Chip Zdarsky and Daniel Acuña are two very well-known, accomplished creators who have never really been at the top of any of my lists. They're both good, but I don't have any works of art that I can point to and say, that's why I love those artists. But this series, honestly, blew me away. It helps that we have Alex Ross doing the covers, or I think this is actually Alex Ross and Daniel Acuña. It doesn't look like just Alex Ross, but it also doesn't look like just Daniel Acuña. The details on his face in particular look more like Daniel Acuña to me. I'm talking about his eyes and the wrinkles around his mouth and the overall palette that he used to color his face. So I don't know if I'm right if both of them worked on the cover, and if I am right, I don't know what kind of process they used, but I'd be really curious to see who started and who finished. So if you haven't read the issue yet, basically we're following Old Man Captain America around in a future where S.H.I.E.L.D. is basically a police state and there are barely any heroes, or if there are any heroes, they work for the government and S.H.I.E.L.D. And the superheroes that we're familiar with, like Captain America and Spider-Man and Iron Man, are not around anymore. Nobody really wants to hear from them. There's quite a bit of misinformation in the media, which is pissing off Steve Rogers, of course. Iron Man and the Wasp have a son who looks suspiciously like the singer from Bastille, and he's a brat, he's rich, and he's super smart, and he works for the government, and he answers to the president directly. We've got enforced curfews, we've got constant surveillance by the government, and we've got these iron cops going around enforcing all the laws, which Steve Rogers has a problem with, as you would expect. And by the end of the issue, Old Man Luke Cage has basically convinced Steve Rogers to become Captain America again, and to not really join Cage's Defenders team, but to become the only real Avenger still out there. So that's the gist of it. It's Captain America being a man extra out of time and dealing with fascism, which, yeah, we've heard that story a million times, but there's a reason that we tell the same story over and over. It's just a good story. I will never not want to see Captain America fighting fascism and bullies and misinformation. When you think about it, mankind has been telling the same stories over and over and over for thousands and thousands of years. We just put different dressing on it every time, but we like the same story as long as it feels modern. And this story, dressed up in this way, is something we don't get very often at Marvel, at least not very well done. We've got strong parallels between Avengers Twilight and The Dark Knight Returns, which is crucial reading for your understanding of Batman. Here we see Old Man Batman wandering the streets of this future version of Gotham that he doesn't really like, he doesn't understand, and it's just becoming not the Gotham he worked for. And in Avengers Twilight, we see Old Man Steve Rogers walking the streets of a future version of New York that doesn't really look like what he fought for, and he doesn't really like. In The Dark Knight Returns, Batman has to come out of retirement to clean up Gotham, and that is exactly what Captain America is doing in Avengers Twilight. There are also strong parallels to be made between Avengers Twilight and Kingdom Come, which is by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. Excellent reading. In Kingdom Come, Superman is retired, the golden age of heroes is long over, and the new crop of heroes we have is just not getting it right. And that's the case in Avengers Twilight, where the new Avengers are controlled by the government and they are not doing things the way heroes should be doing them. But there aren't very many Marvel comics that you can compare to Avengers Twilight directly. It's a future setting, but is somewhere between the 2099 future and the Earth X future. My point being, this is a very familiar story, but it's a very fresh take on it for Marvel in particular. And like I said, I don't have any writings that Chip Zdarsky has done that I can point to and say that I love, but this one I think is going to be the one that I point to and say I love this, because the pacing is so well done, the understanding of the characters is so well done, the dialogue is really strong, the world building just from the script is really vivid. Zdarsky has followed a reasonable progression for where these characters might go if certain events happen, and he's given us new characters who are related to old characters who seem plausible and believable. It's not just some non-canon future that we can throw away when it's over. This is a bunch of characters that we are intimately familiar with, living in a not-so-distant future that is very believable. This docu-series that gets mentioned that gives a new take on the Red Skull and basically paints him as almost a hero is a really vivid, specific piece of world building that has the same kind of feeling that you get reading Marvels, where you feel like you're living in the Marvel universe, like this is a real place, it's the place that you live in, but they're superheroes. And I am a sucker for when superheroes go on television in the comic and they have arguments on live TV, because not only is it a really efficient way to do exposition and character building, but it also reminds you that this is a real place where people are living and people need to be entertained and people need to have jobs. So just from the script, we have excellent pacing, we have excellent character building, we have excellent dialogue, we have an excellent premise overall, and it is well executed. I finally feel like I'm reading a classic Marvel story as it's happening. happening. This has so much weight to it for the Marvel Universe. As far as the art goes, like I said before, Daniel Acuña has never been my favorite artist, but in this issue, he has taken his work to the next level. This is the best Daniel Acuña art I have ever seen. Right away, we get these great shots of Steve Rogers. Look at the coloring work here. You can feel the wrinkles on his face. And then we get to see these old World War II posters that are really well done. I am super picky about the way the art from the 40s and 50s is portrayed in art now. Because a lot of the time when people are thinking of 40s propaganda, they're not thinking of actual propaganda from the 40s. They're thinking of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. They're thinking about someone's idea of someone else's idea of someone else's idea of what propaganda looked like. It's easy to reproduce the poses and the kind of language that that era used in their posters, but it is not easy to authentically reproduce the actual colors and textures of that era. And these posters we see here are super convincing. They're some of the best retro looking art that I've ever seen in a comic book. Look at that coloring. Look at the work on these words down here. Those fonts and the color schemes they use. Oh, that's the good stuff. So we have this great page turn moment where we go from looking at all the retro stuff with Captain America to the present, which is so different. Just look at that color palette. It's almost neon. Everything is a hologram. What a fresh take on the future. Look at the cars. Look at those big old wheels on the cars. It's like something out of Tron. They've even got advertisements on the sidewalk in this future. What a great world-building detail. It's so annoying and so truthful. There is so much detail in this artwork. Look at the surveillance drone we have up here. There's a flock of pigeons. There's a dude riding around in what I assume is the equivalent of like a groundskeeper golf cart. And then we even have the classic robot dog thing walking around back there. And then later in the issue, we have this flashback sequence. And look at this panel up top here. That is a powerful image. Look at Captain America's figure standing atop that wreckage. That is some straight out of 9/11 imagery. Even this panel that's just fire here. Look at the colors and the shapes and the way he's drawn those lines of motion makes it feel like you're in an inferno. I forgot that I didn't mention the moment with Spider-Man, but really you should just read it for yourself because it is a powerful moment. It is so well written. You're gonna love it. And by love it, I mean you might cry. Oh man, just look at this page. We've got the disembodied head of Tony Stark. And look at all these futuristic colors. This is like watching the best sci-fi movie you've ever seen. Even the lettering on that second panel there, that pink in contrast with all the reds and the blues. Oh, this is a gorgeous page. One of my favorite details that they put in here is Luke Cage's skin is still bulletproof, but it's also mostly immovable. So it's been super dense his whole life, and now in his old age, he can barely move because his skin doesn't want to move. And that is super cool character development. It makes sense, and you don't even need a good reason for it because it's superhero science, so it just makes sense with superhero physics. And take a look at that last page. What a great step up to the plate moment for Captain America. Ooh, that is classic Captain America right there. What a great picture. Look at the lighting in there and the color work. This feels so new and yet so familiar at the same time. This issue is freaking great, okay? I loved it. This isn't some sissy future comic where they can just kill off characters willy-nilly because it doesn't matter. We're gonna get back to the main continuity anyway. This is so well done that it feels canon. This feels like the actual events that will happen in the future unless the superheroes in the present do something to avoid it. I won't go so far as to compare it to Civil War yet, but I think this series is going to be better than Fear itself, and that is high praise coming from me. Only complaint that I have is a complaint that I've kind of always had for Daniel Acuña's art, and that is that he's not always very precise in the information he's giving us. It's not always the clearest artwork. Like my first time reading through, it wasn't immediately apparent to me that Captain America was getting his head shoved into a bag here. And for this panel, it's not immediately apparent what's happening because all the colors are so similar. You have to really double check to make sure you know what's going on in that panel. Sometimes Acuña will skip the details to prioritize the overall feeling of a panel. Like you can see on her legs here, there's really no detail there. It's just a silhouette. But this is all part of his style. He's really good at setting a mood. He's really good at making you feel the weight of a situation. And if his style requires him to lose a little bit of detail so that he can have a more potent feeling, then fair enough, I suppose. And you're really not going to get anywhere in comics if you don't have a recognizable style. So sometimes compromises might have to be made to make your style recognizable. So I'm willing to overlook his lack of detail in some places. I'm willing to work a little bit harder to understand what's going on in a panel because overall, overall, his style is just overwhelmingly good. It's so immersive. So I'm really tempted to give it a 10 out of 10. I was very surprised at how much I loved this issue. I'm super excited about the rest of the series. I just don't want to get my hopes up so that they can have so much farther to fall, because this series could go wrong really fast. So I'm going to give it like the highest 9 there is to give. And if the rest of the series goes well, then I'll give it a 10. So go out and get this book. Make sure it's on your pull list. It's a 6-issue miniseries. You're gonna want the whole thing. Pre-order the trade if you have to. Maybe we'll do a hardcover. It's good enough that I want it in hardcover on my bookshelf. Whatever you do, don't watch those stupid YouTube videos where they just pan over every single page slowly so you can read it for free on YouTube. That's lame! Book is great. It's worth your money. Did you read it? What do you think?